Welcome everyone to another Beehive video where I compare the differences between Affinity Photo and Adobe Photoshop. In particular today we're looking at the zoom tool and how they are different. Zooming in both programs is very much the same. There are some added features found in Photoshop that you don't find in Affinity Photo. Whether they will contribute to a better workflow for you is really questionable. First thing that I would like to point out is when you open an image in both programs, this is the same image in both programs, the zoom level, the amount of image you see in the image in the main window is different. You can see there's a little less here in Affinity Photo versus Photoshop. That's not a big deal because you can navigate quickly around using the zoom tool itself. And plus, of course, I'm using a side-by-side comparison, so it's not really practical. So in terms of when you open an image, it will open it up and maximize the amount. It'll either open it 1:1, which is 100%, or leave a slight border on both edges of both programs to fit within the visible window. You can see the actual scale it is zoomed in down the bottom. Down here we see in Photoshop it's zoomed in at 33%. This is on the status bar down there. We can come in here and actually type in a value, 50%. To see the zoom scale in Affinity Photo, we see it up here on the title bar where it's showing the file name. You'll see that it has zoomed in at 29%, so it's a bit smaller. Not a big difference though. So to start off with, to change the zoom level, there's many ways to do it. First of all, we'll look at how you can use the navigator to do so. I already have the navigator open here in Photoshop, navigator being a particular pane that you can of course move around and reposition in the interface wherever you want. Personally, I don't use the navigator at all. I used to, but there's just faster ways to zoom, better ways to zoom. To turn that on, you just go up here to Window and scroll down to Navigator and just make sure that's checked. And over across to Affinity Photo, it's also called the same. You'll see I've already got it open here called Navigator. A little bit different in Affinity Photo, we don't find any of these tabs or modules under Window. Instead we find them under Studio. So View, Studio, and we'll see Navigator down here. Okay, so with Navigator on in both programs, you'll notice there is a slight difference in the panel between the two. In Affinity Photo, we have a scrubber that we can pull along like this, and it's going to zoom in and out. We can use this little button here, the plus or minus button, to zoom in by 25% each time. So you can see the 100, 75, 50. And we can also just left click and holding down, we can reposition the frame. That's useful if we're zoomed in quite a lot and we just want to navigate around. That's the purpose of the navigator. We can navigate around to where we want to be in the image. The navigator is useful. It does give you an overall view of where you are if you spend a lot of time deep inside an image. But again, I find there's faster ways that I'll show you in a moment. In Photoshop, we get our preview much the same. We have an input field as we do in Affinity Photo, and we have a scrubber that we can just pull along as we get closer. We also get a shape that we can use to pull along. If I go in really close, we can then reposition it again, same as Affinity Photo. We can also zoom in and out by checking or clicking rather these icons. That is a mountain. That's a small mountain. That's a big mountain, just in case you didn't know. So if I click that, it zooms in closer, click that, it zooms out. So there we go. So they're pretty identical, really. Okay, so one of the most common ways people tend to zoom into an image is by using shortcut keys. I know I do. So we'll start in Photoshop. So if I wanted to see this image at 100%, you can see right now I'm at 66. There's a shortcut key Control-1 or Command-1, I believe, on the Mac. Control-1, and there we are. There's now at 100%. Or Control-0 to fit to screen. and it fits it within the available window space. So if I just temporarily press tab to get rid of our sidebars and go Control 0, there it goes, fitting inside that span. Control 1 goes back to 100%. Over across to Affinity Photo, if I do the same, Control 0 to try to fit it within the window, you'll notice it does just the same thing. Control 1 and it goes to 100%. So we have the same shortcut keys between both programs. Okay, so let's explore the actual zoom tool itself. So I already have the zoom tool active here inside of Photoshop, the zoom tool. This is new in 2018, that little preview thumbnail that's coming up. It's good for anyone who's starting out new in the program. If we come across to, so there it is there, the zoom tool. You can also access it by pressing Z or Z on the keyboard. Across to Affinity Photo, we see very much, by the way, as you can see, the icons in a familiar location to Photoshop. Down the bottom here we see zoom, or also Z on the keyboard will do the same thing. So as soon as we activate the tool in both programs, similarly we get a information bar, toolbar at the top, giving us options for that particular command. So in Affinity Photo, we see that there are quite a few less than over here in Photoshop. So let's explore those now. If I wish to change the value in Affinity Photo of my zoom level by selecting from a list, I can do so from this drop down box like this. Why you would use that, I'm not too sure, when you can of course use the actual zoom tool itself or one of the keyboard shortcuts, but it's there if you need it. Or you can use this handle here and just scrub along. Okay, this is unique to Affinity Photo. You'll notice it has these little check marks, almost like a ruler along the line. As I drag my mouse across, it snaps to those, and these are snapping at fixed values rather, 100%, 90%, and so on. So that's kind of useful, and how it does that kind of snaps. So if you're getting really precise, using this scrubber and snapping to fixed values is useful, definitely more useful than selecting from a list. Over in Photoshop, we don't have the same option here to actually select from a list. We can come in here and type a value. I do recall being able to select from a list down here in the menu. Maybe that has changed. I'll need to explore that. In any case, the option is not provided above. Now, I'll start with one of the fastest ways to zoom in, generally speaking, having explored the toolbar. We'll come back to these options here in Photoshop. But the first one is by, once the tool is active, the zoom tool, I'm here in Photoshop with the tool active. If I just left click on the mouse, wherever I am pointing to, so if I point over here to the sun and left click, it zooms in. Okay, and inversely, if I want to go out, I do the same thing by left clicking, but this time by holding Alt. You can see the icon changes to a negative, a minus, and the information bar tells me I'm zooming out. And if I click, it's also going to zoom out. Again, zoom out in the place, or zoom in wherever I'm clicking and pointing. And it does so, I find, in terms of thirds. So not halves. So you can see it here at 100, it goes to 66%. So it's going in thirds. So if we come over to Affinity Photo and do the same, I'll just press Control 0 to zero out the, let me just Control 0, there we go. Okay, so if I activate the zoom tool by Z and then press and click, you can see there it zooms in. So it does the same thing, but differently. It zooms in by 25%, so quarterly, as you can see there, 200%, 150. Oh, my apologies, actually it's doing it by halves, isn't it? Okay, and also what's noticeable is that it's more staggered, or you could say faster, the way it's zooming in. Over in Photoshop, if I do that again, there is a slight animation involved. So whether that's to your liking, it does, in my opinion, create a more user-friendly experience than zooming in such a haphazard way. Not a big deal, really. So just zeroing those back out, Control 0, Command 0. If I activate the tool again, the other way that we can zoom in is by what's called scrubbing, or at least that's the term given by Adobe. So long as this check mark here is on in Photoshop, by left clicking and holding down, I can zoom in like so, and holding down the Alt key and doing it again, we can see it zooming in and out in an animated way. Now that looks really cool. It looks really neat. Now it does add a nice visual effect to the whole process. But in my personal opinion, it's too slow. I don't find that particularly useful. It looks cool, but yeah. Just to point out, that option can be disabled, that animation, by going to the preferences, so under edit menu, preferences, and I believe it is under tools. We'll see here, we have animated zoom check. So if I uncheck it and now do the same thing, I'm holding down the mouse, I'll let go, and you can see it's just jump into the next focal point. So it's not animating that zoom. So if that's something you decide to use and you like that animation effect, just make sure it is on. It is on by default, animated zoom. Okay, over to Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo, if I click and hold down, you can see it doesn't have the animated effect. There is no option for animating as of yet. So it just does similarly to what Photoshop does when you turn off the animated zoom. Now, I just indicated that the scrubby zoom, when I zoom in holding down mouse, they're actually, I apologize, that's a different zoom option. Scrubby zoom is related to what I'm about to show you now. When that is checked off and I hold down my mouse, it's still going to do the zoom as before. But if I hold down and go right, I'm holding down the left mouse and I move my mouse right or left or whatever, it creates a marching ants window. Also, you get with it a little info showing you how many pixels there are. And if I release, it just zooms into that area. That's very useful if you want to zoom into a particular element. Of course, you can do that similarly back in the navigator by just choosing your zoom level and scrolling around. What the scrubby zoom does is introduces a pretty cool feature, and this is actually personally what I use all the time. I find it fast. So with it checked on, I can grab my mouse and just click left mouse and hold, click and hold the left mouse and drag to the right, and you can see it zooms in. Like so, wherever I point on the screen, it will zoom in. It's a very rapid way to get in and out of your image and to just move around. So I find I tend to use this most often as my zoom go-to tool in combination with Control 0 just to jump back out like that. It's very fast. Called the scrubby zoom. Over to Affinity Photo. If we do the same, you can see I'm clicking down left mouse button and dragging. It does just the same. Now you'll notice on the options bar there is no option for scrubby zoom because it is implemented by default. Affinity, or Serif, the developers of Affinity, decided that it's useful enough to just be as standard. If you do want to revert to the option that you find in Photoshop, which means to turn off scrubby zoom and drag a box to select your area, you can also do the same in Affinity Photo by holding down the Alt key. Alt and left click and hold down draws a box. If I let go, it zooms into that into the selected area or the defined area. So that's the Alt key. Okay, so I leave that checked on all the time. A couple of options here that are not available in Affinity Photo are these three buttons. They're pretty self-explanatory, 100%. So if I'm zoomed in and I hit 100%, you can see there I'm now at 100% zoom level. Fit to screen will fit within the Windows frame, and fill screen will fill the entire screen, excluding the sidebar. So if I hit tab, you can see there it's filled not just here on the side, but also vertically as well. So the entire screen, the window size, will be filled. That's useful if you decide to be working in full screen, which I'll get back to or show you another time. But if I go full screen by pressing F on the keyboard a couple of times, I can sorry, my bad, if I just press, there we go there. So more or less full screen. Where are we? Let me just get back to that. Okay, so if I have an expanded window and press fill screen, it fills the screen just the same. I find it too cumbersome to go between these options here when you can just be pulling in and out very fast with your mouse using the scrubby zoom. Okay, so let's just exit that full screen and bring them back side by side. A couple of other options in Photoshop not available in Affinity Photo are these two: resize windows to fit and zoom all windows. So resize windows to fit works like so. So if you're working, let me just expand Photoshop again into the full window here. In this instance, I'll actually need to use the maximize button. Okay, so if I've got my window, if I've got my my image displayed in a window, so if you've got multiple images and they're displayed in different windows, the resize windows to fit will do the following. If I expand this image like so, it provides lots of gray area, and I zoom around, it basically will operate as expected. With resize to windows to fit, if I click to zoom in, that is, you can see quickly resize the frame to fit whatever it is or wherever I am focused in on. So if I just double click there to go to 100%, it resizes the actual windows. Now look, again, it's kind of a cool tool, but I find not one used in practice because I don't like working with windowed frames. To restore that, by the way, just click on the title bar there and drag to the top. You'll see you'll get a display showing the blue border. Let go and it'll snap back. Resize windows to fit, that's that. Last one is zoom all windows. Now zoom all windows works where you have more than one document open or window. So I'm just going to go up to image and duplicate to create a copy of this image. So now we have two files open, and I'm just going to stack them or arrange them rather two up vertical. So now we have two, and we can see they're both zoomed in at different zoom scales, one at 66, one at 100. With zoom all windows checked, let me just show what it's like actually without it checked. If I just click to zoom in here on the left hand side, it does just that as expected. If I click over here on the right hand side, again as expected. Now the zoom all windows is a very cool little tool that I do sometimes use if comparing images. So first of all, I'll just restore the image to fit within the frame. We use Control 0 for that. And over here, the same thing, Control 0. I'll actually go Control 1. I want them both at 1 to a 1 or 100%. So with zoom all windows checked, it repeats the same zoom level across both images. So here, if I was to click on the sun, it clicks on the sun and zooms in on both. If I hit the minus and click on this tree here, it will do the same on both sides. I find that very cool. That's very handy, particularly if you're getting into the detail. You want to compare one to one between two images and you want them to look the same. That's a nice little tool to know of. I have noticed this though. If I was to do a animated zoom by holding down and then letting go, you'll see it does zoom in to the same zoom distance, but now the alignment's out where they're no longer authentically side by side. So I'm not too sure if that's a bug in Photoshop or what it is. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to know of. Okay, moving right along, let's just get rid of that one and minimize our frame again. Under the options or preferences in Affinity Photo, we'll find, so if we go under Edit, Preferences, under Tools, there's an option here to use mouse wheel to zoom. So if that's checked, it's going to do exactly that. So if I scroll my mouse wheel, where my cursor is indicated is where it will zoom. So some people like to use the mouse wheel to scroll, and that's cool. That works quite nicely. Is that the same in Photoshop, you wonder? Well, right now I'm scrolling my wheel, I cannot do it. However, if I go Edit, Preferences, come across to Tools, we will find Zoom with Scroll Wheel. That checked on, and we can do just the same. So if that's something that you like, that's a nice little way to do it also. Two other ways, I told you there was a lot, is by using another keyboard shortcut, starting here in Photoshop, Control Command plus or minus to go out. Plus zooms in, minus goes out. Plus, minus. Okay. That's useful, but you'll notice when you zoom, it doesn't zoom to where it is specifically you are going. So that can be a little bit cumbersome at times. Going back to the scrubbing kind of zoom, is it does zoom rather to where you're actually scrubbing. Okay. Now the other one is using a keyboard shortcut Alt. So here in Photoshop, if I hold down the Alt key, there you go. Not working. If I go to Preferences and turn off, I was pressing the Alt key and using my mouse wheel to scroll in. I believe that's because this is checked on, Zoom with Scroll Wheel, unchecking it, and now doing it, you'll see it works. So holding down the Alt key and scrolling with your mouse will act as if it's using Scroll to Wheel, but with one added benefit. You can see wherever my cursor is, it's zooming in. So it's kind of like an enhanced version, isn't it, of the zooming with the Scroll Wheel. Coming across to Affinity Photo, if I do the same, hold down the Alt key and scroll my mouse wheel, it does exactly the same. So that's another nice way to get in and out of your image. Opening back up Preferences under Tools, we'll see one last option here, which is Zoom Click to Point to Center. If I have that checked, wherever I am, my Zoom tool active, Z, and click, you can see it's just going to zoom wherever I click to the cursor position. Again, a little bit slow. If I come here to Affinity Photo, and if I click down here, down the grass, you can see it's doing just the same. So it's set as default. Coming back to Photoshop, let's just uncheck that and repeat the same thing. Well, I have to admit that one has me baffled. I might have to come back to that one, guys. If someone knows why that seems to have no effect whatsoever, please let me know. So that would wrap it up. That's using Zoom tool in Affinity Photo and Photoshop. What do you think? Which one's better? In my opinion, they're pretty much the same. Do you have a particular way that you zoom? Let me know in the comments below. And please like and subscribe. These are some new videos. I'm just starting out now on YouTube, so I would much appreciate it. Thanks so much.